Discovered photos of my boyfriend with a mysterious woman and found his name in her family obituary. Now I'm questioning everything. Tim and I have been together for 2 years. We are both foreigners living in Europe. Names have been changed. Tim is a very private person in general, and so maybe some of the strangeness stems from that. In order to explain everything, I think I have to start at the very beginning. Tim and I met at an event for native English speakers after each of us having lived here for a year. We hit it off immediately. Later that week we went to a pub crawl with other people from the event and hooked up. Only a few days later we decided to meet up again, but when trying to decide if it'd be at my place or his, he told me it has to be mine and he'll explain why later. For the record, I do not live in an ideal situation to be having people, much less men, over, and he was completely aware of the situation. He came over and told me that he is currently still living with his ex-girlfriend of about 3 months. He had his own room and everything, but because he had prepaid for 6 months of rent to lend her some money, he was staying there. Okay, so yeah, I know this is weird. But who am I to judge? He says they are definitely broken up and I'm just sleeping with the guy right now, so whatever. A few weeks go by, and we decide to start dating exclusively and officially. He says he's just living with his ex, who we'll name Stephanie, temporarily for another 3 months, and then he'll find another place. Alright, so it's a weird situation, but I trust him, and he'll leave in 3 months. He complains about having to live with her and says it's uncomfortable. He also told me why they broke up, which was because he caught her cheating on him with her ex at a party. So I'm not worried about them getting back together. I'm not 100% comfortable with the situation, but it's manageable. A few months pass and Tim doesn't move out. He says he's now got his own little apartment in the same house, but that it's so much better for him to stay there because he doesn't have to buy any furniture and the rent is cheap. Remember, we're foreigners, so buying a ton of furniture that you're just going to have to sell when you leave is annoying. He eventually starts saying that he's going to bring me over there to show me that they're living separately and whatnot. Long story short, that never happened. Every time I asked him to ask her about it, he'd say that she'd get upset and blah blah blah. Apparently she was aware that he had a girlfriend, but didn't like it and wanted to get back together. After a year, he finally moved out. Not into his own place, but into the spare room at his buddy's house. I had been to this buddy's place before, only once, though, and that has been the one and only time I've ever met one of his non-mutual friends, which is suspicious and strange on its own. I didn't help with the move, not for lack of trying, so no, I never saw him move his stuff there. Again, this was a temporary solution until he found a place of his own. Through various circumstances, company being bought out which lead to job insecurity, him being extremely picky about finding an apartment, he is still yet to move into a place of his own. It's been about 10 months since he moved into his buddy's place, and I've yet to be there, even though I've asked many times. He always says yes, but then later says that he doesn't want to intrude or be a nuisance, etc. So essentially, I've never seen where he lives. Those things, along with me never having met his friends or Skyped with his family, are the underlying basis for my suspicion. But here's where the real stuff comes. Last night, when I couldn't sleep, I went Facebook stalking. I searched for tagged photos of Tim because I know he's weird about his Facebook and doesn't let tagged pictures and posts show up on his wall. While going through the pictures, I found 3 pictures of him while he was visiting home over the summer. In each of the 3 pictures, there is a girl, who is untagged, and sitting next to Tim. In 2 of the 3 pictures his arm is around her, but the pictures are more posed and everyone's arms are around each other. 2 of the pictures are with friends, so I figured she's a friend from home, no big deal. In 1 picture though, they are with his sister and her husband and daughter. So a much more intimate picture. I do not know what Stephanie looks like, and she doesn't have Facebook. I can't find a picture of her through Googling. But I think this girl might be her. I don't know exactly why I think that, but I do. I did some more Google research and found Stephanie's grandmother's obituary. She died in January. So after Tim would have moved out of the house and definitely after they should have been broken up. And yet, on the obituary his name is listed next to Stephanie's as members of the family. I do know that he was close to the grandmother and that she left him stuff in her will, but still I'm suspicious. If what I suspect is true, that means that he was able to hide this from me and her for 2 years, which is honestly just impressive. Right now, though, I'm stuck. I don't want to bring up my relatively weak evidence with him until I can be sure, because he'll just have an excuse and I'll just accept it because I want to trust him and be with him. I don't know how to get any more proof that the girl in the pictures is Stephanie or how to know for sure one way or the other. Update 1. As many people suggested I do, I started with a conversation with Tim, where I made very clear how much the whole situation bothered me and why it was an issue for me. I tried to show him things from my perspective and tried to make him understand why I was so upset. He said he understood and apologized profusely. He cried and I cried. He said it was never his intention to hurt me and that he hadn't realized this had been such a large issue for me, and that he had been selfish about it. He said it was all going to change and that I would meet his friends and see where he's staying, and get to Skype with his family, etc. etc. He said I was the most important part of his life here and that he can't imagine his life without me in it. He said he wants to find an apartment for us to live together and that when I'm done with school, he wants to go back home together for good. He also told me that the girl in the pictures was an old family friend, and that he was in the obituary because he still is close with the family and they still wish I was a part of the family. I decided to wait and see if he actually held up his end of things this time, and so we made up and all was well. What I didn't mention is that during my snooping phase before this conversation, I found the phone number to the landline where Stephanie lives and decided to give it a call asking for Tim. Stephanie's dad answered, and when I asked for Tim, he told me to call his cell phone because this was the landline. So, not exactly helpful. A couple days after Tim and I talked, he texted me asking if I had called Stephanie's house asking for him. I decided not to lie and admitted it. He said that she texted him saying that some girl with an accent had called the house asking for him, and he immediately thought that it must have been me. I explained that I did it because I felt desperate for answers and just wanted to know what was going on. I also told him that it was inconclusive. He got very upset and said I had betrayed his trust and that I was acting like an insane person. He isn't exactly wrong about that part, but I explained that I felt forced to take such actions because I felt like I was never going to get any answers any other way. I apologized for the invasion of privacy and for bothering Stephanie and her family. After a few days, he calmed down and forgave me, saying however, that this may push back me meeting his friends because he told them what happened, and they were pissed that I would treat him that way. I waited a few weeks to see if anything would change, and unsurprisingly, it did not. So, this past weekend, he got very drunk one night and I was able to open his phone with his fingerprint while he was sleeping. I found texts from Stephanie from the day before talking about what they should make for dinner that night. He told me he was out of town for work that night. I found lots of hearts and I love yous, and even him using the same pet names for her as he does for me. He told her he was going out of town this weekend for work and how much he'd miss her. I looked through the past few weeks of messages between them and saw that he had sent her quite a few of the same pictures that he had sent me. He had invited her to have a glass of wine with his buddy and her girlfriend. He picked her up from work multiple times, and there were lots of conversations about who was making dinner that night and what they should eat. I went back and looked for dates where I knew he had slept over with me, and he had always told her he was crashing at a friend's place or out of town for work or something along those lines. I also found a group text message titled Family that included Tim, his sister, his mom, and Stephanie. I looked at pictures of Stephanie that she had sent him and was able to very obviously see that it was her in the pictures that I found on Facebook. So you guys were right. For the last 2 years, he's been living with her and seeing me on the side. All the while telling me how much he loves and admires me and how we're going to have a future together. I have been duped and taken advantage of. And I feel like a complete idiot because of it. I haven't talked to him yet, but when he comes over later in the week, I plan to tell him that I know everything. I also plan to tell him that he is a complete asshole. In my ideal conversation, he'd explain to me why he did this and what the fuck he was thinking during all this, but I am pretty sure those are just things that I'll never know or understand. Obviously I will break up with him. I also plan on contacting Stephanie with a letter telling my side of the story. I will give her dates that I know he spent the night with me, so that she can cross-check them with dates that he did not come home. I also plan to include a USB stick with pictures of Tim and me from the last 2 years and screenshots of some of our conversations from the last couple months. I can't make her believe me, but I want to at least do my best for her. I feel like I owe it to her as a fellow human being to let her know what kind of man she's been with for the last 4 years. I am open to absolutely any advice on my plan and on how to move forward from this. I won't lie, I feel so lost and so helpless right now. By breaking up with Tim, I'm losing a huge part of my life in this country, and I'm definitely going to be feeling this hole for a while. Update 2. So, I took your advice and did not try to have a conversation with Tim. I realized that since he was so successfully able to manipulate me for 2 years, having one last conversation with him was bound to end up with me doubting my findings and perhaps my sanity. I wrote Stephanie a 3-page letter, detailing the relationship that Tim and I have had over the past 2 years. Making clear that it was serious and not just a fling. I mentioned dates and events that most people would not have known about, and I included the intricate lies and backstory that he had told me. I included a list of dates from the last 2 months that he spent the night with me and encouraged her to cross-check them with nights that he wasn't at home. I printed out a few photos of us as a quick visible proof, and I included the rest of the photos on a USB stick in the letter. The stick also contained screenshots of any particularly incriminating conversations that we've had over the last few months. I scanned postcards that he had sent me from various vacations and included those as well. For safe measure, I also included a copy of the letter, in case the hard copy went somehow mysteriously missing. I gave her my email address and phone number and asked her to contact me if she wanted to. On Wednesday night, I had someone drive me to where she lives. If Tim was there, I would just have confirmations that he actually lives there and we'd leave. If he wasn't there, I'd ring the doorbell and hand her the letter personally. We drove the 45 kilometers and Tim was sitting there in the living room on his laptop. It was obvious he lived there. She was nowhere to be seen. His and her names were on the mailbox. I called to see if he'd pick up and he ignored the call. We headed back home. On Thursday morning, I mailed the letter. I ensured that it was registered post. In order to receive the letter she'd have to show her ID and sign for it. On Friday the letter arrived. She was not home, so she received a notification to go pick the letter up at the post office. On Saturday morning she picked it up and I got an email of the receipt with her signature on it. Throughout all of this, I conversed normally with Tim and made excuses as to why he couldn't come over during the week, so as to not tip him off to anything. He stopped talking to me about 20 minutes after she picked up the letter Saturday morning, and I have not heard from him since. He has, however, defriended me and my family on Facebook. I have not heard from Stephanie either. So, now it's really over. I hope with my whole heart that he was not able to lie and manipulate his way out of the situation with her, but I will probably never know. I do not expect to hear from him again. I feel very lonely, taken advantage of, and beaten down. I am going to do my best to try to come out of this situation without trust issues and without being cynical and jaded. I am seeking therapy to make sure I don't slip into depression. Update 3. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and if you had told me before just how strange and intricate the fallout from all this would be, I honestly would have rolled my eyes. I really thought it would be a clean break, a heartbreak that would slowly fade in the usual way. But things didn't slow down. In fact, since the letter, my inbox and phone have been anything but quiet. It started 3 days after she picked up the letter. I got a WhatsApp message from a number I didn't recognize, Stephanie. Her first message was short, formal, almost businesslike. I received your letter. Can we talk? I was shaking as I typed back. She asked to speak in person. Somewhere public. We agreed on a cafe halfway between us. Honestly, I expected a cold, maybe even hostile confrontation, but I walked in and saw her fighting tears over a cappuccino. Stephanie was very different than the intensely private and mysterious figure I'd built up in my head. She didn't wait for small talk. She had printed out my entire letter and annotated the side with sticky notes and highlighted passages. She said, I know. I've actually suspected. For months. But I never had anything concrete. Thank you for giving me something I could actually hold in my hands. She confessed Tim had told her about me a year earlier, but according to him, I was a stalker, from his old expat group who wouldn't leave him alone. He had an entire fake text message thread he showed her as proof. She was embarrassed at how much she wanted to believe him. Her biggest fear, she said, was being alone in this foreign city where her whole support network was him and his circle of friends. She told me about the huge, strange silences, the unexplained nights away, how he would leave for family emergencies but come back with nothing more to say. We compared notes. His business trips were fake. His friends were real people, but he'd isolated both of us from them with the same story. She's not comfortable around new people, let's just keep it us for now. His emotional inertia had kept us both pinned in our own little terrariums, totally unaware of each other beyond vague suspicions. We talked for 2 hours, really talked, after all this time of circling each other without knowing it. It turned out I'm not the only one who's been quietly collecting evidence and doubting her sanity. She had confronted him the day she got my letter, apparently quite dramatically. He sobbed, begged for forgiveness, then packed a bag and left to clear his head. He hadn't come back. 2 days later, she woke up and found her keys and his house key together in the mailbox. He'd disappeared entirely, his phone off, his work telling her he'd taken unpaid leave, and his closest friends equally in the dark. I'm not proud to admit this, but in that moment, with Stephanie's heartbreak so raw and so parallel to mine across the little table, I felt weirdly energized. Like unraveling this lie with another victim made it real. We agreed in that moment we would not be as secret keepers anymore, regardless of embarrassment or fallout. There was a dark humor to it. We were swapping Tim's stories like war veterans trading battle scars. Now here's where it gets wild. Stephanie reached out to another woman, a mutual friend she'd grown closer to during COVID lockdowns. Tim used to house sit her plants. It turned out, this friend had also gotten too close to Tim, but bailed when his evasiveness towards meeting new people freaked her out. She knew of at least one other ex-girlfriend in the city, older, also an expat, who lived on the far side of town. With a little detective work, and some trial and error on LinkedIn and Instagram, we tracked her down. I sent a neutral message. I know you probably don't want to hear from a stranger, but do you know Tim? She called me within the hour. The third woman, let's call her Clara, had dated Tim 3 years ago. She'd also gotten the "it's complicated, my ex won't move out" story. Same secretiveness, same family's wishes excuses, even the stalker ex narrative, except this time, the stalker was Stephanie. Clara said, honestly, I thought I was going crazy. I'm so sorry you're living through this too. Suddenly, the whole puzzle had more pieces than I realized. The rest of the week was a whirlwind of group chats and calls. Stephanie has connected with Clara and, shockingly, a fourth woman, Marie, whom Clara mentioned and who reached out to us on WhatsApp. All of them, in various shades and iterations, had fallen for the same script. Tim, private man. Tim, victim of a vengeful ex. Tim, forced to live in weird arrangements. Every single one of us had been dutifully isolated, given reasons to trust only him, and manipulated into thinking we were his main focus while he juggled the rest. This patchwork coalition of Tim's exes has become part support group and part cold case squad. We've started piecing his timeline together, looking for evidence of anyone else we might not know about. For those wondering, no, there's no child or secret marriage, at least as far as we can tell. No surprise secret bank accounts either. Stephanie checked with the landlord and his old employers. It's unsettling to realize how perfect his long game was, How the language barrier, expat loneliness, and a city full of people always on the move created the perfect hunting ground for his manipulations. He'd counted, correctly, on the fact that none of us knew enough locals to swap stories or run into each other at parties. The strangest thing, though, is how life keeps moving forward anyway. Stephanie and I, and to an extent, Clara and Marie, have stayed in touch, sometimes laughing, sometimes simply texting how you holding up? On gray days. Strangest of all, Stephanie, who was so intertwined with his old life, decided to move out and take an apartment of her own, something she'd always hesitated to do. Clara celebrated by mailing her a housewarming plant, a sort of symbolic "we survived Tim" gesture. As for Tim himself? To this day, no one we know has heard from him. His phone is off. The only online trace is the occasional last seen flicker on WhatsApp and his Spotify activity, sad indie rock, overwhelmingly so, hinting that he's still somewhere, but no one knows where. I've learned he's even deleted his couch surfing profile, a deep cut for the truly itinerant. Emotionally, I feel surprisingly lighter. There's a camaraderie in these small connections, proof that none of us were broken or naive or unworthy. We were simply chosen for a role in his weird, parallel autobiography. I started regular therapy and have taken up painting again, filling my free afternoons with color instead of doom scrolling and suspicion. In the end, I realize that closure doesn't mean understanding why, sometimes it just means knowing you're not alone in the aftermath. For whatever strange turn of fate brought us all together, I'm grateful I'm no longer trapped in that circle of isolation and secrecy. There's a long road ahead, but our Tim's Ex's group chat, yes, we called it that and even gave it an emoji, is already full of shared memes, venting, and the beginnings of something weirdly positive. Update 4. Well, folks, I'm back, this time with what might genuinely be the strangest and most unexpectedly cathartic phase yet in the Tim saga. If you'd told me a few months ago that the aftermath of this dumpster fire would become not just an unsolved mystery, but a sprawling breadcrumb trail across the city, I wouldn't have believed you. But apparently, life after a serial ghost ex-boyfriend is a lot less linear than I imagined. So buckle up, because even I'm struggling to get my head around what happened next. The first surprise, the group chat didn't just fizzle out. Instead, it began to grow. Word got around, mostly through the expat grapevine but also, I suspect, through people overhearing drunkenly overshared stories on Fridays at the pub. The Tim's Ex's chat, emojis and all, became a kind of digital confessional. Strangers messaged, tentatively, "Hi, this is weird, but have you also dated Tim around 2019? Yes, we started giving Tim's various pseudonyms their own inside joke nicknames. He was James to one woman, Tom to another. We even kept a spreadsheet. By mid-May, we had tracked down 2 more women, Sarah, whom he dated in quick bursts between moves, and a Spanish grad student who was only semi-certain he'd given her his real name. Each story was essentially a remix of the same script, always a current roommate who was just an ex, always a mysterious job, always careful segregation from friends. What's wild is that, in almost all cases, he hadn't just maintained 2 parallel relationships, he had sometimes juggled 3 or even 4 at various degrees of intensity and overlap. But here's the twist I didn't see coming. One of our new additions, Sarah, mentioned offhandedly that she still has some of his things, 2 battered suitcases and a guitar, just sitting in my storage room, because he left in a hurry and ghosted me, she said. He never came back for them. Well, that set off an unexpected flurry of speculation. Could there be clues in the stuff? Maybe an address, a clue about where he disappeared to, or just more evidence of his strangely compartmentalized life? And so began the great ex-girlfriend's storage locker heist. Picture 5 women, 3 accompanied by bemused, supportive friends, huddled like amateur sleuths in a bike storage cellar on a Saturday morning, passing around an old nylon guitar case and duffel bags plastered in faded airline stickers. If you're picturing something between a Nancy Drew mystery and a group therapy session at IKEA, you're not far off. The contents were, unfortunately, less dramatic than we hoped, mostly wrinkled shirts, some battered French novels, a handful of concert ticket stubs, and, weirdly, a pile of sentimental greeting cards from multiple family members, with some cringy, but oddly touching, notes about never losing your way, even if abroad. What we didn't find, thank God, was anything illegal or truly jaw-dropping. But there was one thing that made us laugh until we cried, a tattered notebook in which Tim had attempted, badly, to learn Italian, with a page labeled important phrases for meeting people, under which was scribbled, "Sorry for the mess, my roommate is moving out soon." We took it as an accidental confession, proof his duplicity was a way of life, even in his self-improvement projects. But the real adventure began 2 weeks later, when Stephanie got an email. Not from Tim, but from Tim's father. Apparently, Tim had, in his vanishing act, listed Stephanie as a local contact on some official paperwork. His father, whose English was stiff but clear, wrote, "We are looking for Tim. Is everything all right? He's not answering messages. We are worried." As strange as it felt, Stephanie decided to reply. She was honest, in a gentle way, "I haven't heard from him either. I wish you luck in finding him." She left out the rest. In some ways, it wasn't their fault, and in some ways, she decided, not their business. Her message did, however, open a strange, convoluted door. Tim's father replied again, thanking her, and saying he would contact her if there were updates. Over the next week, it became clear that Tim hadn't just disappeared from our lives, he had gone completely off-grid. He'd quit his job, deleted most social media, and according to the friend whose couch he'd supposedly crashed on, an introverted web developer, who apparently only ever saw Tim in brief, pizza-fueled increments, he hadn't left much behind but a couple of bills and the faint smell of supermarket cologne. No dramatic Facebook status, no explanations. Just smoke. But, here's where it gets cinematic. Early last week, Clara discovered her Facebook had received a login attempt from a European country we'll call Neighborland, the same country where another in our group, Marie, said Tim had relatives. This led to another spiral. Should we warn his family? Will they care? Is he safe? Maybe we should let it lie, we agreed, but we followed the digital breadcrumbs, not illegal, but a little bit stalkerish, I'll admit, and confirmed that, for now, Tim was, somewhere in Neighborland, using free Wi-Fi and, apparently, still listening to broody playlists. Q, all of us, in the group chat, letting out a collective sigh of relief but also a kind of anger-laced amusement. Our closure, if you can call it that, would have to be the act of closing the spreadsheet for now. For those wondering about our own lives, Stephanie's new apartment is an early summer sunbeam of a place, tiny, messy, but completely hers. She and I have started a monthly tradition, drinks on her balcony, trading not just Tim memes but actual stories about our lives before all of this. We've talked about everything from crummy jobs to weird European quirks. I can honestly say she's become a real friend, and Clara and Marie are not far off either. We call ourselves the International Trauma Bond Club. Yes, it started as a joke, but it stuck. There is an odd freedom now, in the aftermath, to tell the truth as often as necessary, not because anyone deserves the story, but because we deserve to not carry it alone. Therapy is still happening, for at least 3 of us, and, surprisingly, laughter is too. I can't quite believe this, but I actually started seeing someone new, a gentle, shy Finnish guy who over-communicates if anything, and who practically handed me a dossier on his personal history at date number 3. I don't know if it'll last, but the point is, I'm moving forward. I know internet stories like this rarely have neat endings. I'd love to be able to post a perfect cherry on top, an email or phone call from Tim apologizing, explaining, or even just saying goodbye. Instead, what we have is scattered traces, loose ends, and, most importantly, a web of women who now exist beyond his distortion field, living proof that even the best hidden mess eventually comes into the light. What I didn't expect was how much this experience would open my world, not shrink it. I have a coffee date next week with one of Tim's old college friends, who reached out to say he'd seen our story floating around in an expat WhatsApp group, and wanted us to know, you're not the first. You're not as alone as you think. My brush with Tim was 2 years long, and awful as it was in parts, the story's now a shared one, no longer heavy in my hands alone. This will be my last update unless something drastically changes, but if you take anything from this wild ride, let it be this: sometimes your heartbreak is the beginning of an entire community you never knew you needed. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people you meet picking through the wreckage with you are the ones who help you build something new on the other side.